Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. In today's video, I am going to be discussing the recent news that Spencer Dinwiddie has torn his ACL and will be out for the remainder of the season. I think that this is a bigger deal than a lot of people think, but before I get too far into it, I want to remind you all to leave a like and subscribe. I've been appreciating all the support that I've been receiving lately, and I hope to see that continue. Now, without further ado, let's talk about this Dinwiddie injury. Now, I just want to start this off by saying that this is some very, very sad news. Spencer Dinwiddie is a player who recovered from an ACL tear already once in his career, as during his junior year at Colorado, he tore his ACL. He saw it really hurt his draft stock, and he ended up going undrafted into the NBA, and he bounced around the league. I believe he played for the Pistons and the Bulls and perhaps even a few other teams before finding a home with the Nets. And he really showed massive improvement over the last couple of seasons as he went from being a G League end-of-the-bench type player to being a legitimate starter on a team that looks like a title contender. And the fact that he got injured right before he was probably going to get a really big payday, I could have seen him getting like a 4-year, $80 million deal, or maybe even as high as 4-year, $100 million deal in this offseason. And I just think that this is going to hurt the market for him quite a bit. I still think that he will get paid, and I'm not suggesting that he should opt into his player option, which is a measly $12 million. A measly $12 million. What am I saying? Obviously, that's a ton of money, but I do think that Dinwiddie can do better and lock in some long-term security on the open market. But it just hurts him as a player and takes away a lot of money that probably would have been on the table if this injury were not to happen. It also hurts the Brooklyn Nets quite a bit. And why do I think that? Well, basically over the last decade or so, every championship team, with the exception of the LeBron James championship teams, has had multiple players that were high-level ball handlers who could play make and have the ball in their hands for a large portion of games. I guess really that's with the exception of last year's Lakers, who had LeBron and Rajon Rondo, and that was really the limitation of their ball handling group. But before that, Kawhi Leonard, Pascal Siakam, Fred VanVleet, Kyle Lowry were all great players with the ball in hand the year before for the Raptors. Prior to that, we had the run of the Warriors, where Klay Thompson, Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, and Draymond Green, and even Andre Iguodala were all very good with the ball in their hands. Before that, LeBron James and Kyrie Irving. Before that, the Warriors once again. And the list goes on as you go back to the Heat with LeBron and Dwayne Wade, and the Spurs with Tony Parker, Kawhi Leonard, Manu Ginobili. You need multiple players who can handle the ball at a high level in order to compete at the NBA's highest stage. And the Nets still have that. They still have two champions who have proven themselves to be very high-quality primary options in the offense in Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. They also have a player that I am a huge believer in Caris LeVert. I've said that I think that he is a top 50 player in the NBA and someone that I could see making an all-star team before it's all said and done on his career. But Dinwiddie would have just pushed them over the top for me, and his loss really, really hurts them in that playmaking aspect of the game, as they're just losing out on another guy who can have the ball in his hands. Obviously, he's not much of a shooter, only shot at around 31% last year from three, but the loss of the ball handling, I think, is a bigger deal than people are giving it credit for. Now, there's a couple different ways I could see Steve Nash and the rest of his coaching staff handling this. They could possibly insert Caris LeVert into that starting lineup and slot him in at essentially the 2 guard alongside Kyrie, Joe Harris, Kevin Durant, and DeAndre Jordan. However, I'm not sure that this is the route that I would take, because Caris LeVert is a very strong player with the ball in his hands, and obviously if you're playing him alongside KD and Kyrie, you're taking the ball out of his hands a lot, and as we saw tonight in their overtime loss to the Memphis Grizzlies, when Karis LeVert has the ball in his hands, he can be a very productive scorer, as he piled up 28 points as the Nets' leading scorer in that very close loss. So I'm not sure that he would be my optimal starter. The other options here would be Landry Shamet, Timothé Luwawu-Cabarrot, and Bruce Brown. Shamet is the best shooter of these three. He can also do a little bit of stuff with the ball in his hands, but he's certainly nowhere near the ball handler and playmaker that Spencer Dinwiddie was, and he's also a bit lesser in that aspect of the game than the other options here for the Clippers. He's also probably the worst. Actually, he is the worst defender of these options. So, those are kind of the pros and cons with Shamet. With Luwawu-Cabarrot, he is a terrific athlete who, on the offensive end, is really good at attacking the rim. It also appears that he's shooting the three ball at a higher level, as he's had back-to-back really strong three-point shooting games last night against the Hornets, and then I guess that was 2 nights ago against the Hornets, and then last night against the Grizzlies. But I'm not really sure that I'm willing to bank on that being his true form as a shooter. Obviously, he also shot the ball quite well in the bubble, but so did a lot of other players, and it was a small sample size, so I think that it's likely that he regresses back to the mean of his career numbers of being a low to mid 30% three-point shooter, which is respectable, but certainly not at the same level as the other guys who the Nets could be starting at this spot. However, with Cabarrot's athleticism and terrific on-ball defensive potential, I certainly think that it would make sense for Steve Nash to insert him into the starting lineup. I'm just not sure that it's the route that I would go with. The last guy here is Bruce Brown. And as implied by the fact that I've said that LeVert isn't who I would start, and Shamet isn't my favorite choice, and Luwawu-Cabarrot isn't my favorite choice for this starting spot, it should be pretty clear that I think that Steve Nash should insert Bruce Brown into the starting lineup. Unfortunately, I think that this is likely the least likely, not to use likely twice in a row there, but oh well, scenario to play out, because Brown has really struggled to earn minutes in Nash's rotation so far, and he hasn't really gotten much run time whatsoever, even tonight, when the Nets obviously had a shortened rotation due to Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving taking the night off, as well as the Dinwiddie injury, of course. But I think that Brown would make a lot of sense in this starting lineup as another player who can handle the ball. He's a solid shooter, certainly not at the same level as a guy like Shamet, but he can knock down catch and shoot opportunities if need be. He's also the best defender out of this group, and that's pretty important when you are going to be paired up in the backcourt with Kyrie Irving, who isn't necessarily a plus defender by any stretch. So, like I said before, Brown would be my choice here, but I think that the most likely scenario is that Karis LeVert gets moved up in role from being the sixth man to the starter, and I don't know that I think that that is the best route of action because of the ripple effects that it has on this team. If LeVert is getting more minutes with the starting crew, then I don't really see a path to there being a strong player to run the offense through in the second unit. Tonight we saw Chris Chiozza play a lot of minutes, and he is a plus 3-point shooter. He struggles defensively, and he can't finish at the rim at a very high level because of his slight frame and, well, mostly just the fact that he's 5'11". But he does have some excitement with the playmaking and shooting that could make him an interesting option as a bench point guard for this team. But with Kyrie returning, I think it's much more likely that he would fall out of the rotation. Shamet could see a few more touches off of the bench, as he's shown to be an adequate ball handler. He's not much of a playmaker, and he's not a terrific finisher either, but because of the threat of him as a shooter, he's certainly could be interesting in a pick and roll. Other than that, you mostly just have like spot up wings like Taurean Prince and Jeff Green, or big men who are mostly just going to sit in the paint in Jared Allen, and if it comes to it, Nick Claxton, Reggie Perry. So I don't necessarily know who the second unit is going to run through if Karis LeVert starts. That probably means that Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant are going to have a bit more of a stagger to their minutes so that one of them is on the court for the majority of the game, so that there's a strong primary option in the offense at all times for this Nets team. And although that is a bit of a bummer because of the chemistry that Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant need to establish before the playoffs, it could be necessary due to this Dinwiddie loss. So I'm certainly interested to see how Steve Nash responds to this large amount of pressure on him as a rookie head coach. And depending on what he does, it could have a big impact on how successful this Nets team is during the regular season. I guess the last thing to touch on here is their trade capacity. Dinwiddie was someone that they were rumored to be shopping either in a James Harden deal or a different deal because he is an expiring contract and someone that likely would be inclined to leave because of the back seat he's had to take to guys like Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. And the fact that he is injured makes it a lot more difficult to trade him, as he doesn't have much value as a likely expiring contract who can't play in his 1 year under contract. So this hurts the chances of the Nets acquiring James Harden, although I always thought that was a bit on the less likely side of things to happen. And it also hurts their other opportunities to add on another wing player who could space the floor and defend at a high level for this team, which, it could end up coming back to bite this Nets team in the butt. And, let's all say a prayer for Spencer Dinwiddie and that he can have a speedy recovery and that his surgery goes well or went well. I'm not sure if it happened yet or not. But this is always sad. You never want to see injuries happen. But on the basketball side of things, it'll be interesting to see how Steve Nash handles this adversity. Let me know what you think the Nets should do in the comments section down below. Like I said, I think that a heavier dose of Bruce Brown in the starting lineup would be a nice idea for this team and would certainly help them out and make them better. Let me know what you think. Leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. And I think I've covered everything that I needed to cover, so that's going to be it for me. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll see you all again very soon.